Welcome to the Theerisfoundation. My name is Eris, and today I'm actually going to show you guys how I made this fabric mini handbag. And you can always try this at your free time, and it will be perfect for a gift for a friend. So first we are starting with this thick upholstery fabric that I just had like in my bin, and I'm lining with this red satin fabric because I don't want my project to be too thick. These are the measurements I'm using today. You can either use the pattern A or pattern B. The outcome is always going to be the same. So I'm just going to quickly cut out the outline first before I start carving in all the details, because it's going to be much easier for me this way. So I'm just going to do this quickly, then proceed to the folding. So here I'm just going to fold it in two, and this is like the best way for anybody to do it, especially if you're just a beginner. So after folding it in two, we're going to go on and mark out our opening, and to do that, so you just have like even cuts on either side. You can fold it again if you want, but if you don't want to do this method, you could just sort of like trace out. And I'm just doing this because I want it to be even on both sides. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark out my lines. So as usual, 1 centimeter for allowance. Then I'm going to mark out 10 and 11. So I'm just going to make sure my opening is actually 9. Don't forget I folded mine into two. So if you're doing that full, it's going to be different. So our drop is going to be 12. I'm just going to move my hand forward to make it 11 before I'm just going to use my L ruler and mark it. So I'm actually marking 11 by 9. It's very important you note that, so that if you're doing this as a single fold, as you're just folding your fabric into two, it's going to look a little different. But the method I'm using here is just so I have like even cuts. So this is kind of optional, but because my fabric was thick, I sort of like just notched the same drop, that is like 11 from the top, and I marked like 1.5 centimeter in. I just wanted to make sure like the opening was going to be wide enough, but if you're using a soft fabric, you don't have to do this exterior part. So please don't come for me. I just had to do this last minute because my fabric is actually really thick. You can see the way my scissors was actually struggling to cut through it. So after cutting my outer fabric like this, I'm going to cut my inner fabric, or rather my lining, in the same exact shape. We're not adding or removing any other measurements. We're just going to cut this in two fabrics. So if your fabric is not that heavy, you can actually use the same inside and out, but my inner fabric was really light to compensate for the thickness of my outer fabric. So the first thing we're going to do is join these two, and we're just going to sort of like clip them together before we sew the hole all around. So as per usual, you guys remember my favorite binder clips. They actually come in different sizes depending on the thickness of whatever it is that you are actually working with. So I'm going to take the sewing machine and just sew it all the way around before turning it inside out and top stitching. So you want to make sure you do this level first, because if you sew the outer part first, you're not going to be able to join your lining and outer fabric in the middle there. So if you're sewing tight corners like this and you want to flip inside out, you guys are going to see how I just carefully made like 3 notches on the 4 corners, and that is so that when you turn it inside out, the pieces can actually lay flat on each other, because you need this part to be very neat as possible. If you remember, I actually take it serious, but the front or the upper part of my bag has to be very neat so you can hide all your errors in the inner part. So take your time, don't rush, just try to make your stitches as straight as possible. So in this project, lucky for me, I was able to find the exact thread color, and this is something I always like to do. So even when you make mistakes, you can easily just hide your errors, because nobody is perfect. In handcraft, you can make mistakes, nobody will take you to jail. Just make sure you use a very similar thread when you're sewing. So now to join the inside and the outer part, you saw how I rolled it together. you just do that for both sides. I'm going to show you how I did this one first, then I take it to the table and show you how I flip it inside out. But just align your inner fabric and your outer fabric and clip and then sew. If you didn't get this, you can watch this part over and over. I'm going to even make the chapter so you can just keep going back and watching how I actually rolled it in, because the same thing I'm doing for one side is the same thing I'm doing for the next side. So I'm just going to sew that in. Don't forget our 1 centimeter allowance that I actually left for this straight stitch. And you're not sewing straight across. Don't forget the little notch you made, and this is going to help your fabric open up at the side a little, not too much, just enough for the other handle to pass through. Okay, so after you're done with that, you have to be very careful in this stage because my fabric was almost too thick for this. So always think about this when you're picking your fabric for this project, so that it can actually pass through like this. And I was super glad it did, because I would have been so pissed if after this stage my fabric was too thick to pass through. So please consider this. Would your fabric pass? If it's going to be too thick, then please don't. It's going to either rip or your stitches are going to like stretch out. So now we're going to sew the sides, and thankfully we've been able to hide our raw stitches, so I can just like push our notch out a bit and match the two sides together. I'm going to just clip it so when I'm sewing it doesn't move around, and I'm doing the same thing for the other side. So take your time, don't hurry. And after this, we're going to go back to our sewing machine. And for those of you who are going to ask me the same question eventually, yes, it's a flatbed industrial. If you're using a light fabric, you can actually use a domestic sewing machine, but my fabric was a little heavy, and you're going to see why it was super important I use industrial towards the end. So after trimming your threads, if you have the lighter, you can actually burn your threads out. But after trim your thread, your bag should actually look like a tank top. It should actually look like this. If it does, then yes, you're doing it right. So the next thing to do is actually to close the bottom, but because I am a sucker for hiding stitches, I am going to show you guys how. I can't remember know this pattern. I don't know if you know this, put it in the comment section. This kind of closing where you sew the right side first and you turn it inside out and you sew the wrong side. If you know the answer to that, please, what is it called? I can't remember for the life of me. If you remember it, put it in the comment section. But yes, we're going to use that method to close our bottom so that it comes out super neat. So after sewing the exterior part, it doesn't matter the color of thread you use, you are going to be fine. You're still going to hide it eventually. Then just make sure you trim as close as possible, but try not to cut into your sewn lines because you need it to be as neat as possible. So after sewing the right side, I'm going to turn it inside out and I'm going to sew the inner part to hide our exposed stitches. So let's just quickly turn that inside out, and I'm making sure that I push all the corners out, and I'm just going to sew it again. And this way you don't have like your raw stitches showing, because it's something I really wanted to like make sure that I did not have any open ends. So again, we push it out. But if you actually try this and you see that you have like something sticking out at the bottom, you can actually turn your bag and stitch it further in to hide any exposed ends. So what do you think about this project? I've always wanted to make this type of bag, but for some reason it has never really come up. So finally I've done it, and it's super easy. Let me know if it's something you would try in the comment section, and if you do, please send it to us. We would love to see your work, and if it's really lovely, we would even want to share with the class. If you would like to collaborate or join our Theerisfoundation squad, just hit me up and I will send you the date, and I would love to work with you guys on any project you want to. If it's something that I can do, I would love to be a part of it. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.